Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will discuss Chapter 15 of Freemasons for Dummies, Freemasonry and the Future.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have three-quarters of our usual gang of hosts. We have very worship brother David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington, brother Craig Graham from Kalamalka Lodge number 160 in Vernon, British Columbia, and I'm Matt Appel. I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243, and we meet in Montlake Terrace, Washington. Steve had a minor emergency and couldn't be here this evening, but I'm sure we'll see him again in the near future. So, Chapter 15, Freemasons in the Future. I listen to other Masonic podcasts. Not that I endorse them. No one should listen to anything.
What?
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have admitted that on air. But there's one where one of the members has done some statistical analysis, and essentially, if you draw that straight line out from the descent of membership of the Masons over the last since World War II, essentially. So I think since the early 60s.
Don't do math on the show. Okay.
Exactly. That according to him, that somewhere between 2040, 2045, we're going to essentially run out of Masons. It's all going to be over.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, Masons in the future, don't worry about it. We're done.
So what am I going to do with my Monday nights then?
Well, you only get back one night a week, or one night a month rather, so it's not a big deal.
It's only one night a month. Yeah.
No, that's
true. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure this is not what he intended about in this chapter, but sometimes I find myself thinking about what will Masonry look like in the future. I mean, as there are fewer and fewer Masons and fewer lodges, assuming things continue the way they are, which maybe they won't. That at some point, do Grand Lodges just collapse? Do we just have lodges of Masons, or do Grand Lodges merge? Does the Grand Lodge of whatever Idaho, Washington, and BC all form together to make one big old Grand Lodge? And I find myself wondering what it would look like in those scenarios.
My gut tells me that would not ever occur. Well, for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think that Freemasonry is going to completely go away, or at least to that extent. And secondly, we can't agree on what we're going to have for lunch, let alone to get three jurisdictions to agree on something.
Imagine the ritual.
Try and
welcome to my world. Yeah.
trying to merge two lodges or consolidate two lodges or three lodges, over time. That's just a small microcosm of the idea of, and how would you, I guess maybe technically Washington and Alaska as an example, that was very different ideas, but were spawned out of one, but we all have come from another. Every grand jurisdiction has come from another at some point. So it's not completely out of the idea. I mean, we were Oregon lodges at one point. We weren't Washington lodges. And so I guess I could retract my statement to say that it's not impossible, or it could be done, but it certainly would be a different flavor of Masonry for sure. Would it, this is something I hadn't even thought about, but would it spawn more clandestine activities?
That's possible. And there's more of it out there when you look around at the number of different Masonic air quotes organizations that are out there. It could, and that's a whole other can of worms we'll talk about on some other occasion, but it could. I would always worry that you would just sort of get into a cycle of apathy that would lead to something like that. You just wouldn't. How do I say it? People have said that they would rather be in a lodge with 10 really dedicated Masons rather than 100 guys that just pay dues.
Yeah.
So you always hope that even if it got quite small, that you would still somewhere be able to find a group of people dedicated to the to keeping the craft. Now, you're going to lose something in the process. I mean, different lodges have different traditions. Some other time I'll comment about what I've seen in British Columbia over the years. But hopefully, some spark of it will be kept alive. I don't think it's going to, and any statistician can draw a line, and then because it's like the old saying, you draw a human life over a long enough line, eventually it ends up in zero anyways. Right. So, and probably when these problems really need to be dealt with, we may not even be here anyways. Our AI avatars might, but we might not be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of lodges. Craig, do you have your own building there in Vernon?
We're tenants in a Masonic building.
Okay.
So the other lodge is the holder of the and we've got a Scottish Rite Lodge of Perfection here. I haven't gotten active in the Scottish Rite yet, but that's about it for Freemasonry. Of course, at one time there used to be a Royal Arch chapter. I think there was a couple of other appendant bodies, and the youth bodies were active in Vernon. That's kind of all dried up over the years as well.
Yeah.
What does surprise me? I don't know if either of you guys would know of an area of Washington that's like this too, but so Vernon, Kelowna, Penticton, Summerland, Peachland are all areas that have gotten a lot of retirees over the years, and presumably people that have come from somewhere else. Presumably a lot of them, or a number of them, Masons, but we haven't really seen any growth in. Kelowna's had two lodges for decades now, from a point when it was a city smaller than Vernon to when it's well over 100,000 people now. So it just surprises me that Freemasonry hasn't grown. I mean, I know we've all seen the decline in our jurisdictions, but even still, when you see population is increase in certain areas as much as they have, that the Masonry hasn't grown with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I don't know if you've noticed that. I mean, Seattle used to have a lot more lodges than it does now. And the suburbs of Seattle are a lot bigger than they used to be, but they don't have that many more lodges than they ever did.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's every once in a while somebody says, whatever, we're getting more mason, or the number of Masons is leveling out or whatever. But on a per capita basis, they're still plummeting. And I don't know that in an absolute number we're getting more Masons either. I haven't seen our Grand Lodge proceedings say that in a long time. So, but no, I agree. You would think I've thought the same thing about churches. Like they put up not too far from me, they put up an apartment complex next to a church, and I found myself thinking, well, that church now has however many thousands of new people that are right next door. That maybe some of them will start going there, but it doesn't really work out that way. It's just not part of the. Someone said I guess it was on the last episode, that it's just as the World War II generation came home and joined everything, and then the Vietnam generation said, if my dad did it, I'm not doing it, and joined nothing. And then we've sort of fallen out of the public eye, or the public mind, if you will.
That's one of our biggest recruiting issues, I think. Well, we don't recruit, but I mean, you know what I mean, that we is the fact that there was that one, when you had that one generation that largely stopped doing what their parents did, then that was a massive loss of connection with the organization. Because I've met so many people of the baby boomer generation that, yeah, my dad was a Mason. But it doesn't occur to them that they would have ever gone on to join and perhaps continue a family tradition or anything like that. That's the kind of thing that's really difficult, I think, to come back from, because these people have likely had kids that not only did not think about joining Masonry, they didn't even really know that it existed. And so that's sort of a really, really hard place to come back from. I don't know it's hard to think of what the solutions to that are. We have to be careful that we're not creating solutions that are in need of a problem, if you know what I mean.
I don't think I'm speaking out of turn if I when I tell the story or tell it how our Deputy Grand Master, he was talking about, and he might bring it up, or we could ask him when we interview him, hopefully in July or whatever, assuming he gets elected. He was talking about his impression of how they're like Matt just talked about, that the World War II guys came back and then their families said, revolted, essentially, their children revolted, essentially said, we're not going to do that. He had a different interpretation of why I'm not going to do that, is that maybe not completely, but somewhat correlated, that, they used to call TBIs or what's the PTS, things like that, from the military. The guys would come back from the military, and now we have these definitions and processes. We understand maybe a little better what those men and the soldiers, women in some cases, went through during those. They used to call it shell shock, or other terms that were much less. We didn't understand it as well. Of course, we still don't understand it completely. But so, what his beliefs, some of it was that the guys came back from the war, and they were disconnected from that, not only from that experience, but also they had experiences that they wanted to forget, essentially. And so when they came back, instead of sitting home with the family, they went to the lodges. And so they were gone a lot. They were gone and at the concordant organizations, they were gone at multiple lodge meetings. They were gone, like Matt said, one night a month. Well, it really turns out to be almost every night of the month. You're gone a lot to avoid that connection, even what we're talking about with the previous chapter, that connection even with their family. They don't sit down at supper. They don't do those kind of things. Don't go to churches. And so his opinion was that the children, the men, the boys being raised, saw their fathers doing that. And that's what they said. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be gone all the time. That was an interesting interpretation.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because I've always thought of it in the way that look at my grandparents' generation, and we don't realize what they went through, because they went through the war, which of course in Canada started in 1939, in the United States it started in 1941. But before both of those dates, you had years of economic uncertainty and dislocation. I mean, there was almost it's like a 15 or 16 year period of time where you had depression and then followed by war. And one thing that's interesting when you look at the war, and I've read about this, like you talk about PTSD and shell shock and all the other names that it's been referred to as. So at the end of the war, the Second World War, those guys, having been in combat, were all put back on troop ships and had several weeks together to deflate, talk to each other, play cards, just, and then there was a long period where they were mustered out of the service afterwards. You look at the Vietnam War, they were, running around in rice paddies in combat. They got their notice that they were going home, and 3 days later they were at home after having flown back across the United States. And it did not allow for the same sort of decompression from that kind of experience. And so those people were not prone to looking for, because they weren't cultured to look for a social environment in which to relieve the stress. I mean, not that it was a perfect solution, but I mean that was just the way that it had always been done. You went to the crusade. It took you a year to get to the Crusades. You fought in the Middle East. It took a year to get home. So you had all of that time to unwind. And I, even now, I don't know that it's gotten any better with the quick travel back. And there's no desire or push for people to keep in a social environment, join the Legion, join a lodge, get active in a church. It's not, society just hasn't moved in that direction for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, frankly, we could sit here all day and talk about all the different aspects of it, but I don't, just like there are many different causes, I think there are also going to be many different small solutions to various aspects of, and there are those who say it's not even a problem, right? We're refining, we're not dying, or whatever the phrase was. We did a whole couple episodes on that a while ago.
Right sizing.
Yeah, exactly. Is that, if that's what's going on?
But, I was going to ask you guys something, because I've never had any experience with this, but the author, Andrew Hodat, brings us up right in the middle of this chapter that we're discussing. The 1 day classes, is that still a thing anywhere?
I think I want to say Ohio. There are a couple of places that still do it. It's on the books in Washington, but we haven't had one in years.
So you guys did do it at some point, eh?
Yeah, I was right. I think it was right around when I joined. It was a thing for a couple of years, and they did a few. And actually, they have done one in the last couple of years, but it was a sort of one-off, strange case that
Okay.
it's not worth going into the details of. But yeah, it's they're not as big as they were for a short while there, but I think they still do get practiced in, like I said, Ohio in the Midwest somewhere.
Okay. Was that like a 90s or a early 2000s thing? I seem to remember discussion of it back when I was getting active because I don't think we ever did it in British Columbia, at least not that I'd ever heard.
Yeah, Chris even mentions that under that 1 day class that he is actually a product of 1 day classes.
Is he?
Yeah, yeah, and excuse me, several of my friends that I know, you're right, Matt. I came in 2008, and just before then, 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. Excuse me, that was seemed like a very popular time. They were doing lots of 1 day classes. Maybe it was just a particular grandmaster or two. I don't know, but several of the guys I know that are still in are through 1 day class.
I read somewhere some time ago that the one of the things everyone says is, well, they join in 1 day classes and then they disappear. I don't my From what I read, admittedly not first, I have not done the statistics myself, but they're actually no more likely to disappear or to stick around than anyone else. That it's sort of the same, more or less the same retention rate.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
that was it the Masonic Renewal Committee. I think that they had a seminar on that, and it was a 2 hour seminar where it was. I think he was Right Worship all the time, like one of the wardens, grand wardens, and then he gave a talk about is either whatever it's either the Ohio or Iowa, one of the two, like Matt said, the states, and he was that in that state, and they talked about their process and the statistics. Of course, as my grandpa used to say, liars figure and figures lie. You can make up numbers however you want to do it potentially, but I think their cause was just, and so that they've shown, and also they had who's the guy from Scottish Rite. I can't think of his name now. He was the second hour, and they both had statistics indicating that 1 day conferral men actually stay longer because they're able to get into a concordant body or another connecting manner, whether it's the lodge itself as an officer or a concordant organization. Of course, he was talking about Scottish Rite specifically. Those that become members of Scottish Rite and stay active longer. And so the theory behind it was that you get in and you're connected. What I highlighted in the book here was that he indicated that they allow men who may not have time to go through the lodge of 1 degree at a time, allows them to move through their degrees. And I thought, well, if they don't have time for a degree, how do they have time to be part of what they're doing? So a little bit contradictory there. But it seemed like if the numbers bear out, I know. I guess, is it better to bring in 100 guys and have 50 of them stay in 1 day, or is it better to bring in 100 guys over 10 years and have 50 of them stay? I don't know. Part of me thinks you might be losing some guys that would have been part of that if they had a more streamlined manner. But also, if our lodges were functioning better, there'd be a better pipeline too, right? And that's if we had a better process, if we had better methods, if we had better degree teams, if we were more well prepared, a guy could come in and advance through the process of degrees rather than saying, oh, that's right, we need to get this guy a second degree. Oh, that's right, we need to do it. Or, well, where is he at? What do you mean, where is he at? Everybody should know. It's just, certainly he talked about how men join and they aren't finding what they're looking for. And I think that's an absolute underlying current of reality and of truth, that lodges aren't, or at least they're not bearing out what the man thinks it should be. And I'm a big proponent for the path forward, and will continue to sing its praises. If you want more information, you can go back and listen to our interview with Linda at the Council Grand Masters, how she talked about the path forward and what an amazing program. And we're I'm on the cusp of developing a program here. Ask for forgiveness if I'm not supposed to advertise on Facebook, but we're gonna do some things to drive interest, not only in my new lodge that I belong to, but also King Solomon. And we're going to look at having open houses, quarterly open houses that are regular. Right now, it's a little bit disjointed, even though we have a pretty good process. I said we're going to do things on purpose. When a guy comes in, instead of just socializing with him before he leaves, okay, what's next? What does your calendar look like next week? Let's get it on the calendar for next week, on the next time. Don't let them leave without having an appointment. And then for new guys coming in, and them as well, every quarter we're hoping to have open house. In the first 10 to 15 minutes will be more formalized, presentation on Freemasonry, what it's about, the ideals of it. It'll be in the lodge, so they can go in the lodge room, look around. They can maybe have some refreshments, and then there'll be focused kind of coaching, if you will, or focused discussion. That night will be about that, not about social. We have our social nights, which are separate, and that's really all we've had. Now we need to have, okay, here's the next step. Here's what you need to do. And there needs to be some small permissions in there too. I was just listening to another non-Masonic podcast, but another podcast I was talking about permission based. If you, it was kind of sales oriented, but idea of expectations, setting expectations, even for the candidates, even for the seekers, and giving them small tasks. Okay, we need you to do this next time. And if they can't do that, then do they need to give them a smaller task? So anyway, I'm kind of going down the whole recruiting hole here, but it is, we're going to talk about Freemasons in their future.
I get it, because there's a point here that's made that where he's talking about the age-old American Masonic custom that a man has to ask to become a Freemason, not the other way around, which is the exact opposite of the United Grand Lodge of England, in which a man must be invited to join. So there's obviously, and again, I think that there's something there that goes back to the effect of the Morgan affair in the late 1820s. And I was going to make a comment about something too, David. We've brought this up before about people join and they don't find what they're looking for in Freemasonry. One of the problems is I think that people come into this not really sure what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what I want, but this isn't it. Kind of the whole, I don't know art, but I know what I like. It's a bit of a bad comparison there.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we have on the petition something to that effect, like, why are you wanting to join Freemasonry? And that's always kind of the same. Oh, I want to be part of my community, or I want to give back, whatever. But you're right. They don't know. I didn't know when I was joining what I wanted necessarily, but I think I knew. I freely admitted. And on the first page, it talks about how the Dan Brown and National Treasure and other things like that sparked interest. There was a bubble in 2006, 7, and 8. I was part of that trailing edge. I'm a National Treasure baby. I fully admit it. What it did for me is it prompted me to ask the question of my uncle, who was a Shriner for 50 years. Yeah. And I had met him and we talked several times. He was in Missouri. I knew about kind of the idea of what he did, but I didn't really know. But I thought, oh, what's this about? And he goes, oh, you finally asked. the old ideal. So I didn't know what I didn't know either, but I was intrigued. But I think I'm kind of probably in that middle range where I was looking for something more. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for, but I was part of EFW. I was part of Lions Club. I knew about community and about clubs and support and things like that, but neither of them are really filling my bucket individually. And so I knew what I was looking for, but I wasn't sure. And so I wasn't on the extreme where I was, wasting away, not knowing where I want to be in life. I had goals and purpose. And then I also wasn't on that far extreme where I'm looking for the secrets of the world, of how the onion's made. There's guys that are real deep into esoteric, and they already come into. I mean, we had a guy that said he had read Morals and Dogma a couple of times. I was like, okay.
How?
You're right. So I think I was in the middle there. And so but I think when we come in, when a guy comes in, he's looking for a little mystery, is how I phrase it. And what he gets is bills and coffee.
Yeah.
That's what he's not looking for.
No.
Yeah.
No. And that's, and we go around and around with that one. And we've certainly talked about solutions to it. I've got some very distinct ideas on what I would like to do about that in the future if I'm able to, but that's a years long prospect.
He even notes in here that men don't join a Masonic lodge because it gives money to charity, right?
Yeah.
People, they might join to be charitable in their mind. They think charity is philanthropy. I still try to ingrain that idea that charity is not charity in Masonry, but people, they might think that's a piece of it. Oh, I want to be part of the community. I want to give back to my community. But what we need to be able to tell them, instead of giving them the answer, oh yes, we give to charity, we give to this group, what we really need to be able to tell them is that your giving back to the community is through making yourself a better man. Then you can go out and give back to the community. The old idea of put your mask on first. Until you're prepared, until you're ready, until you're better, then you need to fix yourself too. But we're also not fix it club, right? We're not fighting the distraught and the people that are already bad. It's not a easy bake oven program for men.
I thought that was the gym, but oh well. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots more to unpack here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's this, as we've said before, this is a topic that could take one a lifetime to study and figure out. Mm-hmm. And frankly, just Grand Lodges knowing where they are, I think is the first step. And I think that we're not necessarily taking that step in every case. Yeah. But that is my personal soapbox that I've gotten onto several times before. So before I start spouting off again, I will say that thank you all listening for Working Tools Podcast. We look forward to seeing your comments on YouTube and social media. And on behalf of Craig and David, in the absence Stephen and myself, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.